Hi friends, welcome back to Notes from the Waiting Room. Bear with me today. I slept with the fan on a couple of days ago and my voice is paying for it. Like, it doesn't hurt to talk, but I definitely feel strained and I feel like I have to clear my throat every 2 seconds. But welcome back to Notes from the Waiting Room. Today we're going to be talking about identity, but more specifically how learning the truest thing about me completely changed my life. And I know that sounds kind of dramatic, but I really mean it. It really did change my life. And not in a way that things were perfect overnight or I never struggled again or was never insecure again, but in a way that once I learned the truest thing about me, I just couldn't keep living the same way. And I feel like a lot of us do that now, is that we're building our lives around things that are true about us, but not the truest thing about us. And coming from experience, I think it's such a dangerous place to live in because sometimes those things are true and that's what makes it confusing. Like sometimes you did grow up around certain things. Sometimes something did happen to you, or sometimes you did fail, or somebody said something that was true about you. But the question that I keep coming back to is it the truest thing? Because just because something is true about you doesn't mean that it gets to become your identity. So I read this book called The Truest Thing About You by David Lomas. I read it early on my walk with Christ. I think like the first year, and I think that book completely changed my life. It is written by David Lomas. He is a pastor in San Francisco, and that book gave me language to something that God was already trying to teach me. And the idea of the book is that there are a lot of true things about you, but there is a truest thing. And learning the truest thing about you has the power to transform everything. Like your job can be true about you, your relationship status, your achievements, your failures, your family story can be true about you, but those true things cannot be your foundation. I think that's where a lot of us get stuck, is that we take something that's true or half true or sometimes true or true in the season, and we push it down all the way down to the core of our being, and then we start building our lives around it, and then we start making decisions around it, and then we start limiting ourselves or protecting ourselves because of it. And then we wonder why we're so unstable, because when you build your identity on something that can shift, when that thing shifts, you're going to shift with it. I'm going to give you an example. If you build your identity on being desired, when you get rejected, you're not just going to feel disappointed, you're going to feel worthless. And how do I know that? Because I've done it. I grew up with a lot of stories around me, and I'm going to be a little vague here because I'm not trying to have y'all know all my personal details or my family details, but I do want to be honest. I did grow up around brokenness. Like, I did grow up feeling confused about family and culture and belonging. I grew up feeling like certain things were just going to be part of my story because they were part of the story that was happening around me. One of the best things that I've learned, like, on this entire journey so far is, and I think it's actually in that book, I think that's where I learned it, is that predisposition does not equal destiny. Like, just because you were exposed to something doesn't mean it gets to define you. Like, just because something runs in your family doesn't mean that it gets to rule your life. Just because you're struggling with something doesn't mean that that struggle gets to be the deepest truth about you. And I'm not saying those things don't matter. They do matter. Your experiences matter, your family story matters, what happened to you matters, but those things are not God. Those things are not the truest thing about you. Those things are not allowed to define what Jesus died to redeem. I think about marriage, for example. Like, a couple years ago, I didn't want to get married. I just saw no point in it. My parents were separated, and I just thought it was a piece of paper and like people can just separate. And yeah, those things are true. Like, technically, you can get a divorce, but that's not the truest thing. Like, God can restore, He can redeem, He can renew, He can build something different than what I saw growing up. And so, had I continued believing that or living in my brokenness, I would have just built a life around it. And I would have moved as if I was protecting myself, but actually, I was just putting up walls. And that's the thing about false identities, is that sometimes they don't look destructive at first. Sometimes they look like protection. Sometimes they look like wisdom or empowerment, or like I'm just being realistic. But in reality, they are rooted in fear. And fear is a terrible foundation. I think about culture too. Like, growing up, I felt really confused about where I belonged because I never felt enough of one thing. And I even started like internalizing comments that people would make, and They probably didn't even mean them like to harm me, but I still internalized them, and I just started feeling like I had something to prove. And that's when I started grabbing onto certain identities that would like give me permission to do things. So like, I have an attitude because I'm Latina, or I'm strong minded because this is where I'm from, or that's just how we are. And I know that that sounds funny, but it really wasn't funny because I was using these identities as permission to like stay immature and like be mean and rowdy. I was using culture to excuse a behavior that didn't reflect Christ. And I just want to be clear, cultures are beautiful. My culture is beautiful, my background is beautiful, but even those things are not the truest thing about me. Like, the truest thing about me is not that I'm a Latina. The truest thing about me is not that I'm from New York. Like, yes, those things are true. They shape me, but they're not my foundation. Because when they were my foundation, they were giving me an excuse to act in ways that God was actually trying to free me from. Another thing that I think about is the way that I used to chase validation. Like, I remember wanting to be seen so bad and wanting to be chosen and wanting to be desirable, and like, if somebody liked me, I felt valuable. If somebody rejected me, I would feel worthless. I just remember it being so exhausting. Like, now looking back, what an exhausting way to live. I remember being in seasons where I thought I was so free and so empowered, and just feeling like this is my body, I can do whatever I want with it. And from the outside, it looked free, but it didn't really feel free. Like, now looking back, it was not free. It was still chasing, right? Needing another moment to prove that I was desirable, needing another person to affirm me. I think sometimes we call some things empowerment or empowering, but we actually just don't want to admit that it's what's keeping us empty. And sometimes I feel like we call something confidence, right? But it's actually just like your insecurity performing. And I don't say that to condemn anybody. Like, I'm telling y'all my firsthand experience that I know what it's like to feel like you're in control, but actually be ruled by the need for people to validate you. And I'm telling you that Jesus didn't shame me out of that. He loved me out of that. And that's the difference. He didn't come into my life and say, look at all the things that you did wrong. He showed me who I was and started showing me that I didn't need to keep proving myself. And sometimes there's identities that you don't even give yourself, like the world gives you, like unprovoked, you didn't even ask for it. And it makes me think about my first job out of college. I got a job, I was a recruiter, and I went into the system after I got hired, and I looked for the feedback on my interviews, when they collect feedback. And one of the comments said, not polished enough. Boy, that happened at least 10 years ago. I was carrying that around for like 7. And so I internalized that, and I walked into every room lugging that around as if just because somebody wrote it down made it true. Like, it was a fact, like it was permanent, like I couldn't change it at all. And I carried that shame over something that wasn't even supposed to define me. And I think that's why this conversation is so important to me, because sometimes it's not even things that you put on yourself. You're carrying stuff that other people put on you. Like, someone called you difficult one time, or they said you weren't successful enough or pretty enough, and then you just start agreeing with them. Like, as if just because someone said it means that God said it. But God didn't say that. And if God didn't say it, then I'm not going to build my life around it. One of the biggest and most transformative lessons I've ever learned is that my true identity lies in who God says I am, right? What God says, not the world, not what I've done, not what's happened to me, not my achievements. And who I am in God's eyes is loved, valued, seen, known, held, and not because I earned it, but because of Jesus. If you define yourself by your achievements, you're always going to need another one. If you define yourself by your failures, you're going to be too afraid to try again. If you define yourself by your relationships, you are going to collapse every time somebody leaves. And I know that because I've been through that. I have failed. I've had a failed business. I've been misunderstood. I've been rejected. I've been dumped. Bad things have been said about me. I have had things happen to me that have shaken my confidence. But guess what? Had I let those things define me, I would still be living under the weight of the last thing that didn't go my way. But now, because of Jesus, those things can be true, but they're not the truest. Like, yes, I've failed in the past, but that doesn't mean that I'm a failure. Or, like, yeah, I've been rejected, but that doesn't mean that I'm unwanted. And that is what changed my life. It wasn't pretending that those things didn't happen or that they weren't painful, but just knowing where to put them and also replacing the lie with the truth. Ephesians 2:10 says that we are God's workmanship. We are created in Christ Jesus to do good works that God prepared beforehand. And as I've been rebuilding my identity in Christ, that verse has been so comforting to me because it reminds me that nothing is an accident. My gifts are not an accident. The rooms that I walk into are not an accident. This season that I'm in is not an accident. And that has completely changed the way that I move. I don't always feel like I fit in. I don't always feel like I should be in certain rooms. But now I walk differently because now I know there's nothing wrong with me. Like, maybe I'm supposed to be there to learn something, or maybe I'm supposed to meet someone, or maybe someone's supposed to meet me. And honestly, that's just a different way to live for me because for a long time I was just driven by my insecurities or my pride or my need to be seen or valued. And now I'm learning to operate from a place of confidence and humility and love, and not performative, but from knowing that I'm already loved and seen by God. And that's where real freedom started for me. Like, once I stopped chasing the external things, that is when I actually started experiencing freedom. Like, I thought that I was free, but I think that true freedom is truly believing that you are accepted and loved by God and not needing the world to confirm what He already said. Because when I know who I am in Christ, I can have things without those things having me. So, like, I can be a wife and not make my marriage my God or my husband my God. I can want to be a content creator without, you know, feeling like the success of that is the foundation of me. Or I can want to be a mom without having that define whether my life matters or not. And those are all good things, but those are not things that are supposed to be my foundation. And if I lean into those things, then I'm leaning onto something that was never supposed to hold me up. So I have to keep pushing down the truest thing about me down to my core so that it frees me to enjoy the other roles in my life. I'm learning these things in real time. This waiting season, I am jobless after almost a decade of working, making good money, feeling like secure in that way, and now I'm home on a budget, asking God what He wants me to do with this time, and learning how to feel steady without the things that were, helping me feel steady. Some days it's hard. Some days I cry because I'm scared, and I get the ants, the negative thoughts that come up, and they ask me, or they tell me, like, what if you never get a job? What if it doesn't work out? What if you're wrong about content creation? And I'm just learning to call those thoughts out for what they are. And they could be half truths, but they're not God's truth, and they're not permanent, concrete, exactly what's going to happen in the future. Old me, who did not know the truest thing about her, probably would have used this season as an excuse to spiral and to numb out and to just do anything to temporarily make myself feel better. But this girl who does know the truest thing about her is that I belong to Jesus. I am loved by God. I am not what I do. I am not what I have. I am not my job title or lack of job title. I am not my worst season. I am His. And that truth has to be pushed down so much deeper than any other truth, because there are a lot of true things that will try to take first place. There are true things about your past, your personality, your body, your family, your successes, your failures, your current season, your bank account. But none of those things are stable enough to be your foundation. So at the end of every episode, I do want to leave you with like a question that you can like think about, ponder, meditate, or journal on. And today's question is, what have you made the truest thing about you? Not just true, but the truest. And this is not to ignore your story, but this is so that you can bring your story under the authority of Jesus and ask Him, what have I been building my life around? What have I agreed to that you didn't say that I was? What parts of me are you trying to redeem that I keep calling my identity? Because I really believe that Jesus wants to meet us there. I really believe that he wants to untangle the true things from the truest thing. And I think that he wants to remind us that we don't have to make ourselves. He has already given us an identity. And in a season where everything is shifting, I think that's the safest place to be. Not in what you do, not in what you have, not in what has happened to you, but in who has you. And Jesus has you. And that is all for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.